Hey, 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 what's up, Real Life Church? How's it going? Happy New Year to all of you. I hope you had a great New Year. My name is Mike. I'm one of the pastors here, and I just want to take a moment to welcome our other campuses from Simi Valley and Lancaster, and those of you who are watching online and hanging out with our awesome online campus pastor, David Park. We're so glad that you are with us today as we kick off a brand new series of messages that we think are just going to be so important and needed, especially as we walk into the year that is 2023. Are you guys excited to be in 2023? I thought we'd have flying cars by now, so I don't know what's going on, but oh well. All right, so we're starting off a brand new series today. Now, I don't know about your family. I don't know a lot about your family, but I imagine that a lot of you are in maybe one of four stages, okay? One of four stages. Maybe you're in the new family stage. Some of you, if you're in the new family, you got a new baby, first kid, let me hear you. Type it online. All right, we have no one in the room, but maybe you've been in this stage before. Or maybe you're watching at our campuses or you're online and you are in the new family stage. And you know what this stage is, right? It's brand new baby, sleepless nights. You're always checking to see if that baby's still breathing, right? Wondering if maybe you could put it back where you got it from after you brought it home for a little bit, right? You're a little overprotecting. And you're looking at this baby and you're just thinking, man, it can't get any better than this, right? You're savoring the moment and you're imagining, you know what? I think even though we've only had this baby here for like less than 10 minutes, we're ready for baby number 2, right? That's what new parents often think, okay? For the first couple of nights. Maybe you are in the toddler preteen stage. Anybody with a toddler to preteen, let me hear you. Good. Okay. Now. Okay, good. Okay, everybody feels good. If you're in the chat there, type it in. Maybe you're in this stage and your kids are not babies anymore, but they're still, really dependent upon you, but they want to be independent, right? Like maybe you're getting a little bit of better sleep, but not the best kinds of sleep. Your schedule is filled with a lot of play dates and school award ceremony and school supply shopping, and the list of school supplies, they get longer and longer every year. Your kids, maybe you have multiple kids and they're fighting over toys, or they're fighting with each other. There's endless random questions that are happening. They're always asking you the weirdest questions. Every time they come home from daycare, preschool, their friend's house, or school, they have some weird stains on their clothes, and you have no idea where they came from, right? And you just start looking around and you're like, man, these are the moments of being a parent. This is awesome and fun. And you don't want to miss these moments, but you're also starting to plan on how to get rid of them out of your house at some point, right? Maybe you're a teenager. Anybody got teenagers in the house today or online? Yeah. Oh, man. Maybe you're here. Maybe you're like our family, and we have a mixture. We have a teenager, we have an almost teenager, so a preteen, and then we have like a 7-year-old, right? And what you're starting to realize is that you have to schedule time with your teenager or you won't see them for days, okay? They literally live in their room. And when you happen to get a chance to walk into their room, it smells like somebody has been trying to put in an in-home landfill, okay, in their room. Your teenager thinks you're an alien. They think you're so you don't understand. You hear that a lot, right? And you're wondering as a parent, can I just put this kid back into the womb of their mother so that they could come back as they used to be? Maybe you have a little one who's trying to figure out his or her identity while your middle child is no longer the sweet angel you used to believe she was, right? You're beginning to realize that in a few short years, everything you took for granted is about to change. And while you're sad that, man, your teenager won't be living in the house and your kids eventually will all move out, you're already planning on how to get into witness protection so they can't find you. Or maybe, just maybe, you might be in this last stage called the empty nester stage. Any empty nesters in the house today? Yeah, you heard that, right? I said that and the guy's like, yes! I've been looking for that stage. Right? Maybe you're here. Maybe you just sent out your last kid to college, and the next day the construction crew is coming in to make your man cave or your new mom space, right? Now you're walking around the house with clothes or no clothes on. I don't know what you do. That's your own business, okay? Right? You don't have to call dibs on the remote anymore. And as you're sitting down to write that tuition check, you're worried of all the things that could go wrong, but you believe you've done the best to prepare them for what the world has for them as you and your wife and you and your spouse get ready to take that big trip that you've been planning since the day they were born. Now, whatever stage of life that you may be, and I get that there are some students and kids who are watching online in our other campuses here in the house. I get that, those stages. But I'm talking specifically to our adults who work with kids, who have kids, who are around kids, which are almost every one of us, okay? Whatever stage of your life that you're in, at some point in time, you may have said these three words: kids these days, right? Kids these days. Now, maybe you said it in like a kind of a bad way, like kids these days. Like they're always on their phone. Kids these days are always on their phone, right? I know my wife and I, we say this often. Kids these days, they never go outside anymore. Have you noticed that? When I was a kid, man, I couldn't wait to go outside. I hated rainy days, right? But now it's like, it's sunshine. We live in California, and they never want to go outside. How about this? Kids these days take everything for granted. They just think money grows on trees, right? Or kids these days don't appreciate all that we as parents do for them. Maybe you've said it in a more positive manner as you've marveled at the things that kids these days get to experience. Like, man, kids these days, they have it so good, right? Or kids these days don't have to do research anymore. They just get on Google on their phones or whatever, and they type in the question, and they get the answer like that. When I was a kid, I lived at a time where I'm not as old as some of you more mature people in the room or online today. We had computers when I was a kid, but not every house had a computer. You had to have money to have a computer in your house, okay? So, but still, if I had a question, I had to go to the library or I had to go to school to look on a computer to get the answer. Now it's just at the tip of your phone. And kids these days, they come up with just the craziest, coolest sayings and things. Have you heard this saying called, well, it's two words. It's the same word. One's a verb and one's a noun, okay? Let's go with the verb, rizzing. Have you heard this term before? Yes, I heard some of you, yeah. Okay, if you got teenagers, you definitely heard this. It's rizzing, okay? It's this idea, you remember for us adults in the room when like you'd say to your friend like, hey, you got something on your shirt? They look down, you go, poop, right, up their nose. Remember that? That's called rizzing, right? Rizzing. Now, that's the verb. The noun, rizz, okay? I was explaining to we were having dinner a couple nights ago, and so we were talking about crazy words that people use as kids. And so I was explaining to my kids that back in the day when I was a kid, when I was a teenager and stuff, when you were talking about a person who had, who had a lot of charm with the girls or with the guys, you would say, man, they got mad game, right? You'd be like, oh man, yeah, you got mad game. So I was telling my kids, I was like, I had mad game when I was in high school. I was tight, right? Now, we all know that's a lie, and my daughter sniffed it out so fast. She said, Dad, you ain't got no riz. And my wife fell off, and she was like, that's so true. And I was like, honey, you're supposed to be on my side, right? Kids these days, let me just tell you, right? And here's the thing about kids these days. They're facing a lot. When you think about it, when you think about kids these days, they have it so much better than a lot of other previous generations. They really do. Think about this. The mortality rate for infants and kids are down 50% since the 1980s. You believe this? 43 years ago, half the babies and kids that were in society were dying. And now that's down 50%. We now have ways to diagnose things like dyslexia or ADD or ADHD. We have even more information to provide our kids with a well-rounded diet. I mean, we've made it a national law that it's required to wear a seatbelt. But in other ways, we're finding that things are so much worse for kids these days. Over 40% of college students are reporting that they are feeling way too depressed to even function most days. 60% are experiencing overwhelming anxiety. Almost half our kids are saying that they have no hope for the future. Did you know that between the ages of 10 and 24, suicide rates are so high? Did you hear me? 10 years old to 24 years old. Suicide rates is the second leading cause of death among that age group. The Worldwide Organization of Health, they're reporting that anxiety and depression has increased by 25% since the pandemic. Now, if you're new to real life, one of the things that we do here is we take real life issues and we apply wisdom that we find from the scriptures to help us kind of process and orient our thoughts on how to walk through them. And we use the very words of Jesus to find hope and to help each and every one of us find and follow Jesus in our daily lives. And the truth is that we have some very real issues to deal with, to discuss, that are devastating our kids. And us as well, too. And so things like anxiety and depression and fear and the fear of being alone and technology ruining our relationships and even how to help our kids who are struggling with their identities. All of us are impacted by these. So what we're going to do in these series of messages is we're going to take in these, and we're going to study each and every one of them, and we're going to try to glean some wisdom from what the Bible says to help us and help our kids navigate through these difficult days. Now, let me tell you, you are not going to want to miss one single week of this, especially next week. Next week, Pastor Rusty will be back from his trip from Israel, and he's actually going to be having the conversation with us about gender identity. And I know that we have talked and counseled many of you who are walking through this very issue right now. And so next week, bring a friend, bring somebody who might be dealing with this as well. It's going to be just a really important conversation that Rusty's going to be having. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to use some really good wisdom that we find in one of the books that we find in the second half of the Bible called the New Testament, written by a guy named Paul. Now, if you don't know who Paul is, Paul was kind of late arriving to the original followers of Jesus. He wasn't part of the original 12. He came a little bit later. But God inspired Paul to write most of the second part of the Bible called the New Testament. And in one of his letters that he wrote to a bunch of followers of Jesus who were living in a first century city called Ephesus, they were going through a really difficult season in their life. And the messaging around them was getting kind of weird and just off. And so what Paul wanted to do was to provide them with some hope in the season of faith and life that they had found themselves in. And that's where we're going to be spending our time in this series, is in the book of Ephesians. Now, before we jump into that letter, let me kind of set us up where we are headed today, okay? Here's one of the things that we need to admit right at the top of this, okay? Right at the top of this. That the loudest and most consistent voice in the lives of our kids, and ours as well, is this little contraption. Can we all agree? Nod your head. Thank you. We all agree that this is the loudest and most consistent voice in the lives of our kids and us today. It's our phone. If you and I were to do a screen time study, okay? I'm going to put an image on the screen here. If you and I were to do a screen time study, we would find that most of us spend at least 2 to 3 hours a day on social media. on social media, 2 to 3 hours a day. And you would find that on average, most of us pick up our phone. Just pick it up, let it pop up on your screen 2,000 times a day. Oh, how dare you lie like that? It's not a lie, it's been proven. 2,000 times a day, okay? Studies are showing that among the age of 8 to 12, this is not even teenagers yet, 8 to 12, okay, their screen time, computers, television, and a phone, is up to 5 hours and 33 minutes a day. How about this? For those of our kids who are 13 to 18, screen time is a whopping 8 hours and 39 minutes a day. A day. Now, I don't want to sound like an old curmudgeon, okay, who complains about those daggum cellular phones, because phones are not naturally evil, okay? They're not naturally evil. And I don't think that they cannot not be helpful in some ways. But let me ask you the question, and I want you to be honest with yourselves as you think about this question. Is this really the most helpful voice for your kid? Or is this really harmful to our kids these days? Like, does this voice really help move your kid one step closer to Jesus? Or is it moving your kid one step away from Jesus? And if this voice, this phone, is in some way moving your kid away from Jesus, how do you and I deal with that? How do we deal with that? Should we deal with that? Well, let me kindly just tell you the answer. Yes. Oh, absolutely yes, we should want to deal with that. Why? Because according to social media experts and according to your kids, so over the last couple months, we actually surveyed all of our kids that go to our YX student ministry at all of our campuses. And let me tell you the 2 messages that they are hearing the most in their life. Are you ready? You ready for this? Number 1, you can and should have it all. That's the number 1 messaging that they're hearing across their social media stuff. You can and you should have it all. So many kids are talking about having this unrealistic view of life in relationships because of what they are seeing on their social media. Now, this shouldn't be shocking because many adults, we are experiencing the very same perspective. Like what they're seeing are their friends at a front row concert, at a front row Taylor Swift concert, right? They're seeing their friends on Disney cruises or on vacationing and living in the presidential suite in Lake Tahoe, or they're seeing their friends get full ride scholarships to USC, fight on baby, right? Or seeing their friends get accepted into Stanford, or seeing their friends be awarded with a study abroad opportunity, or maybe seeing a friend get engaged. Now, there's nothing wrong with any of those things. They're good things. But what happens is when you or your kids aren't experiencing those same outcomes, right? And you're not getting those same moments, the question that then pops up over and over again is, why not me? Why is that not happening for me? What's wrong with me? What am I doing wrong that I can't experience that? We see what we think are perfect families and perfect moms and the best dads, the happy couple, and as adults we think the same thing, and we ask the very same questions, and when we experience this over and over again, it can lead to the things that I was talking about earlier with anxiety and depression. Now, this is nothing new, what I'm talking about. This is not earth-shattering news. This has been going on since the beginning of time. Actually, one of the most wisest persons to ever live was a guy by the name of King Solomon. And he wrote down a lot of the wisdom that he had gleaned from God in his life. And the first part of the Bible of the Old Testament, which we refer to as the wisdom literatures. And Solomon understood that what happens when we don't get the things that our heart longs for. Here's what he says. He says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a dream fulfilled is a tree of life. Literally, what's happening to our bodies as we are watching someone else experience the things that we want to experience, our bodies are literally getting sick. Here's the second messaging that our kids that we surveyed are hearing. You are not enough. So not only that you can and should have it all, but the problem is you're not enough. You're not enough. And we've heard this so many times, and our kids are hearing it way more than what we want to believe. They're hearing that you are not enough, that they're not enough, that they're not pretty enough, they're not strong enough, they're not athletic enough, they're not smart enough. You know, you're not the right color, the right gender, the right age, the right weight. I mean, look at this party that we're all at, and you're not in it. Maybe if you were more like us here, then maybe you would be there. So if you want to be like us, you got to try harder or buy this quick fix or have this surgery and change who you are or move out of your parents' house or go the distance with that boyfriend or girlfriend, right? They're hearing this over and over again with no end in sight. And the thing is, and I hate to admit this as a parent myself, but you know me, I'm just going to be honest. We, parents, we're not equipped to really help our kids out of this vicious cycle. We're not. No matter what we do, it doesn't matter what we say to them. We could tell them, you know what, just calm down. It's okay. It's a phase. You'll move on. It'll be better way down in life. But here's the thing. Back last year in 2022, in the month of May, we went through a series called Mastermind, where the overarching thought was that our lives are always moving in the direction of our strongest thoughts, right? So it doesn't matter how much we tell our kids to calm down or move on or it's just a phase, their lives are already moving in the direction of their strongest thoughts. And if those things that you're not enough is permeating over and over in their minds, I guarantee you that their lives are already moving in that way. They've already begun to move in that direction. So instead of telling them to just calm down and it's a phase and move on, here's what we need to do. We need to give them new messaging, brand new messaging. And it's the message that Jesus has been trying to get us to understand since the garden. Similar to what we're seeing in today's culture with bad messaging and thoughts, so too were the messaging that was bad and terrible in the day that Paul wrote this letter, okay? In the first century of the world, they were experiencing the very similar things. Now, this was a time when people were easily swayed by popular teachings and saying and philosophy and philosophical ideas that move the day. Things like politics and religion and self-exceptionalism and a particular kind of mysticism that taught that you could have some kind of special relationship with a deity as long as you had good intentions. So Paul wanted to help change the message. Paul understood that living a life with the wrong messages flowing through your mind could lead to a fragile life and apart from what God believes and says about you and I and our kids. So here's what he writes to those Jesus followers in the city of Ephesus. This is what he writes. He says, God saved you by his grace when you believe. And you can't take credit for this. It is a gift from God. Salvation is not a reward for the good things we have done, so none of us can boast about it. For we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do the good things he has planned for us long ago. Did you catch that? You see, Paul counters the message of culture with the message of Jesus, the message of the creator of the world. the creator of you and I. So instead of the you can have or you can and should have it all or you're not enough or whatever it may be, Paul says, look, your salvation isn't because of anything you've done. It's actually an incredible gift of God. Because the message of culture puts this pressure and this unbearable weight on us. And Paul says, no. God took care of you apart from anything you've done. Because why? He has a plan for you. A plan which has been in place before you were even thought of. Let me ask you, how many times have you or your kids pursued something only for it not to work out? Probably many times. I've been there many times. Have you ever considered that maybe it wasn't what God wanted for you? Now, Paul is saying that not everything is helpful for our journey. And God isn't going to give you what isn't helpful. So instead of the message from culture that you're not enough, Paul says that you and your kids are God's masterpiece. Now check this out. In the original language that this letter was written in, that word, masterpiece, gives off this image of an artist who looks at all of the things that he or she has created and they're like, this is really good, and they're pleased with it. But when they look at the final piece that they created, it is a wonder, a just gratification. This artist believes that this final piece is the apex to everything else they've created. Of all the things that were created by the creator of the world, you and I and our kids are the apex of his creation. The top of the line. And if you're the top of the line, if you're the masterpiece, then that means you are enough. You're enough. And you will always be enough. That's the message we've got to fight for. That's the message that we've got to ingrain into our kids. You are enough. Let me ask you a question. How much is the faith of the next generation worth to you? How much? If you thought, because you didn't answer out loud, if you thought everything, you're correct. The faith of the next generation should be worth everything. And if they are worth everything, we should do all that we can to help them see that they are enough in the eyes of God, in our eyes. And if they are enough and they believe that God has a plan for their life, wouldn't that be so much better than we could ever imagine, than what the world tries to get them to believe? Why? Because God's best is better than the world's best. God's best is far more better than the world's best. So here, let me just give you 2 words that we can do. I'm not going to tell you that, as I always say, this is not the end-all, be-all. You start doing this, your kids are going to magically be the best adults you've ever raised. No, we don't have much control over that. But what we can do is we can pray and we can partner. We can pray and we can partner. Here's what Paul writes. Paul says in verse 15 of chapter 1, says, ever since I first heard of your strong faith in the Lord Jesus and your love for God's people everywhere, I have not stopped thanking God for you. I pray for you constantly. When Paul talks about this strong faith in Jesus, he's not talking about a faith that is going towards Jesus, but a faith that is deeply rooted in Jesus. It's not about this idea of like, okay, I'm going to just hope for faith. It's the idea that I'm already in Jesus and he is already taking care of me. We're not standing outside of the arena. We're actually in the arena. We're already there. And Paul is in constant prayer for those whom he is writing to. He wants them to know over and over again that they are enough and that God has a plan for them. Now, you've heard the saying before, right? It takes a village to raise kids. It's true. I actually believe that's so true. I mean, think about it. We naturally assume that as parents, that it's just us raising our kids. But have you ever stepped back to think about all the adults in your kid's life? I mean, it's not just you, it's grandparents, it's teachers, it's your kids' friends' parents, it's their aunts and uncles, it's the neighbors looking out for your kids, it's your kids' coaches. It's a village. And this is very similar in our faith journey. We have people in our lives who God has placed in it on purpose for a purpose, to help with the exploration and cultivation of faith in Jesus that is building within you and your kids. So how about this? Let's cultivate that by being in constant prayer for our kids and then partnering the people in their lives to make sure that they're being constantly surrounded by people who are speaking the right message in their lives. Paul continues on, and he says that I'm asking God, the glorious Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, to give you spiritual wisdom and insight so that you might grow in your knowledge of God. Paul prays boldly that the outside influences of culture would not stand a chance against the wisdom and insight that only God could give them. You see, we have to contend for our kids in a world that's telling them that the knowledge is what they know internally. You know what I'm talking about. It's the do you, or, I hate that when my daughter says that, oh, Dad, just do you. I'm not trying to do me. Me is messed up. It's the live your truth culture, right? You've heard that. But that is foolish wisdom. True wisdom is the knowledge and wisdom that only comes from God's Spirit. And we've got to pray and partner with people who desire as Paul does. When he says, I pray that your hearts will be flooded with the light so that you can understand the confident hope he has given to those he's called, his holy people who are his rich and glorious inheritance. I also pray that you will understand this incredible greatness of God's power for us who believe him. You see, that's a better message filled with truth and hope. The message our culture is currently giving is masked as hope. They want you to think it's hope, but in truth, it is filled with lies. Lies of the enemy, lies that can be traced all the way back to the garden when on that fateful day, Adam and Eve believed that they weren't enough and that they should have it all, right? But Paul writes that his hope is that we would understand that we would be enlightened with a confident hope that we are God's holy people. And that in the eyes of Jesus, our flaws are not our downfalls. But our awareness of those flaws make us more aware of our need of Jesus. And because of that, when we find ourselves in Jesus, we are found without stain or without blemish. And that knowledge leads to an understanding of the greatness that is within us through the greatness of God's power. Now, don't you think that's a message you and I need to hear? Do you think that's a message you and I need to hear? If you think that's a message you and I need to hear, how much more do you think our kids need to hear that? So let me just do this. Can I encourage you? Can I beg and implore you to believe that following Jesus is the safest, best, and most loving way for your kids to live? And if you believe that your kids in this next generation is worth everything, it's time we start doing everything short of sin to make sure that no kid is left behind. No kid. So here's the prayer that we want you to begin praying starting today for the rest of the year. Starting today. Would you pray this prayer with us? It says, God, may they see as you see, so they'll do as you say. Read that with me. God, may they see as you see, so they'll do as you say. And as you pray this, look for ways to put them in environments where this will be reinforced over and over again. Can I recommend one environment? How about our student ministry? Across all of our campuses, we have some incredible student pastors. Here at Valencia with Emily and Connor, at Simi Valley with Tristan and the team, at Lancaster with Pastor Scott, online with Pastor David. We are creating environments specifically designed for your teenagers. For our kids ministry here with Grace and the team, at Simi with Laura and the team, at Lancaster with Lisa and the team, we are designing environments specifically with your kids in mind. Put them in there so that they can hear that message over and over again. How about this? Remind them that 10 minutes a day in the Bible keeps the doctor away. I know that's not the saying, but it sounded good in my head, okay? 10 minutes a day in the Word will help them know who and what they are. And that is loved by God. Now, you might be here today and you're saying, you know what, Michael, before my kids experience this love, I want to experience this love. And if that's you, if you just showed up to church, it's the new year, and you said, you know, one of my resolutions or the things I'm going to try to do before I break it the next day is I'm going to try to get into church. Today's the day for you to say yes to Jesus, so that then you can begin to pour into the next generation the way God has poured into you. If that's you today, we would love to come alongside of you to celebrate that and to get you on your next step towards your faith journey. And there's going to be a number on the screen, and you just text the word Jesus to that number. I think it's 30930. Text the word Jesus, and a pastor, one of our staff members, pastors, will connect with you and get you that information. Can I pray for you today? Jesus, thank you so much for who you are. God, thank you for the message that you have a plan for us, that we are enough in your eyes. No matter our background, no matter our stories, where we come from, none of that. God, you love us. You want to do life with us. You want to walk with us. So, Lord, would you give us that message? May we see as you see. May we help our kids see as you see, so they can do as you say. We pray this in Jesus' name, and the house said,